So now that Wonder Woman 1984 has finally hit select theaters as well as HBO Max, and I have seen the movie, I'm going to be bringing you all my updated ranking for all 9 DCEU films from worst to best. Hey everyone, Mr. DVB here. Now before getting into this video, there's something I bring up every single time I do a ranking, and I have to do it today, and that is that this list is my own opinion. We all have our thoughts on these movies. Mine are going to differ from yours, so let's not argue about it in the comments. They're movies. We have our own thoughts on them. I went back and rewatched all of the DCU films before seeing Wonder Woman 1984. I had a prediction list for what I thought my ranking was going to be, and comparing it to my actual ranking, it's quite different. My opinions on these movies have changed a lot over the years, so it was kind of interesting seeing how drastic that change was. But without further ado, let's get into this list. Coming in 9th place, we have Suicide Squad. This is without a doubt my least favorite film in this franchise. Rewatching it, it was the only one that I thought was genuinely terrible. I had a very hard time watching this movie. The first 35 to 40 minutes of this movie are a bunch of poorly edited, weird character introductions, and what follows is pretty much an hour and a half of just characters walking through a city, killing a couple of bad guys. It's just really generic and uninteresting. It's a very boring film filled with terrible writing and really, really dislikable characters. Just not a fun film to watch whatsoever. You compare it to the trailers, which were so fun and so energetic. You had Bohemian Rhapsody and Ballroom Blitz playing, and everybody wanted just a fun film with a bunch of villains as the main characters. And what we got was a really boring film that did not know what it wanted to be. The film is just messy. It looks so gross. It's just washed out and uninteresting. And it has, in my opinion, the worst villain in the DCU with Enchantress. Can't stand her. I think she's terrible. And overall, just a very boring film. As far as things I like, Margot Robbie is good in the role. I don't think the character is at all interesting, but I think she does a good job with what she's given. And I think some of the character designs are nice. Killer Croc in particular, the makeup that they did on him was great, although I think the actor is way too small and skinny. Otherwise, the movie pretty much sucks, and Enchantress's brother, CGI-wise, looks atrocious. So those are my thoughts on Suicide Squad.
Divided, we are not enough.
In 8th place, we have Justice League. Now, this is, in my opinion, the most disappointing film of the DCU. I don't think it's the worst, obviously not because I had, Suicide Squad lower, but I do think it's the most disappointing. That being said, I don't think it's flat out terrible like a lot of people think it is. I think it's just mediocre. It's a very, very average comic book film, which if this was, just a generic superhero movie, if it was just a character like, Shazam or some smaller character like that, then it would be passable. Well, the problem is, it's a Justice League film. It should have been so much more than it was. And unfortunately, this movie just crams way too much into an hour and 40 runtime. It's such a short movie once you take away the credits, and you have to introduce basically 3 new characters: Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg, and you have to bring back Superman. You have to do all of that in this short runtime, and that definitely hurts the film. That being said, I still don't think it's terrible. I think that it is an enjoyable movie if you're just kind of forgetting the fact that it's supposed to be the Justice League, which should not be a thing, but the fact of the matter is that I still enjoyed this film, but it's just not very good overall. It's disappointing for what it could have been. It has forgettable action. A lot of the stuff is rushed. The visual effects are terrible for a movie that has a $300 million budget. It looks like a TV show, not just from a CGI standpoint, but even just the way it's filmed. Right? There's so many close-ups, and the film's shot in a full screen ratio, not IMAX, but full screen. And just the combination of these things, I don't know what it is. The intro of the movie with that terrible song feels like a TV show. It's weird. I don't know how to explain it or pinpoint it. It just does not feel like a movie. Steppenwolf's a bad villain. The score by Danny Elfman is pretty forgettable and really disappointing, honestly. And overall, not anything exciting, but there is still aspects of it I like. I like Bruce Wayne a lot in the movie. Don't particularly love Batman just because he doesn't really fit with how he was in the last movie, and I also don't think that he mixes well in nighttime or in daytime settings and that kind of stuff, and the humor with him doesn't work. But when he's Bruce Wayne, I like him. I think Ben Affleck's really good as Bruce Wayne. There's some lines here that I actually like from his character, like when he talks about buying the bank. That was pretty funny. It's a very Bruce Wayne-esque thing. So there's moments in this movie I like. I just think overall it's disappointing and forgettable, and those are my issues with Justice League. Now, as far as the Snyder Cut goes, I know people are hyped as hell for it. I'm interested in seeing how it's going to be. That being said, I don't think it's going to fix that many things. I mean, I'm sure it'll be better and it'll definitely flesh out the characters and stuff more, but I don't think it's going to, improve the DCU. I don't think it's going to, change people's mind on the whole franchise. I still think that it's going to be probably a pretty mixed and divisive film. Will be better than this, I'm sure, but I don't know. I still just don't know how I think it's going to turn out. But, yeah, whatever. As it turns out, as it is right now, Justice League, as some people like to call it, is just a pretty forgettable, generic movie that disappoints.
He's after all of us. The kid just robbed him. You betrayed him. You killed his BFF.
Coming in 7th place, we have Birds of Prey, which is, in my opinion, the most surprising pick on this list, because when I initially saw this back in February, I liked it quite a bit. I thought it was a very fun, entertaining movie with great action and some fun character stuff. And on rewatch, I just found myself to be kind of underwhelmed. I think the story here is very basic. It's just them trying to find a diamond, but the film is muddled by having too many subplots, having an uneven narrative that's just not very well told. It's very similar to Deadpool in the sense where it's fourth wall breaking and, it's constantly cutting between flashbacks and the characters telling it in a unique way. But I just don't think it works for this movie because I don't think there's enough to the story in this film to really warrant that weird, wacky narrative style, and I think it actually hurts the film with how often it's cutting between different events and stuff. And a lot of the side stories just don't work in my opinion. And I don't really love that many characters in this film on rewatch. I like Margot Robbie still. I don't honestly love the character, but I do think she has a good job in the role. But everybody else, I mean, Renee Montoya, don't like her side plot. I don't like Cassie, whatever her name is, the kid. She kind of annoys me. The only character that I like, honestly, besides Harley Quinn is Black Canary. She's the only one in the group that I liked. I think everybody else here, and she's still underdeveloped, but I think everybody else is just forgettable, poorly written, or inaccurate to the comics, in which case I'm talking about Black Mask. I think Ewan McGregor is a fantastic actor. He's one of my favorites out there, and I think he's good in the role. I just don't think it's Black Mask. If they just made another crime boss, that would have been fine, but making it Black Mask, you're setting up expectations that people have for who is supposed to be this very ruthless, badass character. And there is some scenes with him that were really dark, like the whole face-cutting scene. That was brutal, but he's way too flamboyant, and just it doesn't fit for the character. And he only wears his mask in like one frickin' scene, which was really disappointing. Otherwise, though, the positive aspect of this movie by far for me is the action. The action here is great. The choreography is fantastic. It's very similar to John Wick. Same choreographer, so it kind of explains why. That stuff's awesome. The action here is really good. But otherwise, the story is just uneven, and it's not very interesting. And those are my thoughts on Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. Too long of a title.
A hero.
In 6th place, we have Aquaman. So this is a film that I thought was epic when I first watched it. I thought it was such a great experience. And each time I watch it, I like it less and less. I think it's a very cringeworthy movie. A lot of people have been complaining about Wonder Woman 1984 being very cheesy. And what I have to say is, have you guys seen Aquaman? This movie is filled with cheese that it honestly annoys me. Wonder Woman, it kind of fit because it was in the 80s, and I didn't even think it really overdid it. This film just really overdoes it in some sequences. The opening, for example, the submarine sequence, there's a lot of like slow motion with him, and it has like that annoying guitar riff. The characters are firing grenades at Aquaman when he's standing next to torpedoes, which is a stupid idea. The movie constantly has bass drops of music whenever, explosions go off and characters enter into the scene, which happens constantly. The movie's filled with poorly done exposition. I don't mind exposition that much. I mean, movies need it sometimes to explain things, but the way this movie does it, it's like they didn't care, right? They just throw it in and there's a flashback sequence that shows stuff. It just happens too much, and I think the movie overall is overstuffed for what it is, because it is a story about, you have Orm in the sea, and he's wanting to, basically get revenge on the land for, just trashing the ocean, and that's fine. That's fine, but it doesn't mix well with the plot of, Aquaman trying to find a trident. It's just so messy and all over the place because they're jumping between so many locations. It's just not the best from a pacing standpoint or anything like that. Now, those are my biggest issues. And there's some other things like Mira and Aquaman, and I don't think their chemistry works whatsoever. But there is positives. I think the movie overall is a fun ride. I think it's enjoyable. It's fast-paced for the most part. But it's an enjoyable movie. I think the action sequences are really cool. They do overuse the whole rotation effect a little bit too much. That's something that James Wan's known for. I think he does it too often here, but some of the action sequences are great. I love the final battle between Orm and Aquaman. The visuals are really good. I love the shot of Orm landing in the ship and all that stuff. That's awesome. That stuff looks really badass. Really cool character entrance. Even Orm as a villain, I like him. He's over the top, very similar to General Zod, but I like him in the role. Black Manta, I'm glad that they stuck with the comic book suit and all that kind of stuff. It's just what gets to me with this movie every time is the cheesy stuff, because the movie obviously is meant to be lighthearted, but I think sometimes they just overdo the cheesy, corny stuff, and it takes me out of the movie at times. Like when Aquaman falls off a cliff and they have like the sound effect. The humor never works. I think the desert scene is atrocious. Like when they jump out of the plane, I've always hated that. I don't understand how they survive that. They fall down a magical sand slide and go into a kingdom, and there's a stupid joke. All that stuff's really bad. There's some really bad CGI in this movie. I think the visuals are nice. When I say visuals, I'm talking about, colors and stuff. I think the movie really pops out. There's some blue and some bright colors in this that are so vibrant and amazing to look at. It reminds me a lot of Avatar. So that stuff's nice. I think the movie has an uneven story that jumps around a bit too much. And some really cringeworthy moments. Some really bad dialogue. Some stuff with Orm is pretty terrible.
I implore you. You're a kingdom of bloated philosophers and flaccid poets. Whose waters?
Are you saying they executed her? Because she had me?
And, those are my big issues. That being said, there's still some cool locations despite how much it jumps around. The movie is nice to look at. Each location's very different. It feels like there's too much crammed into one movie. But I do love the trench, that part with all the creatures. Very cool, very James Wan-esque. And stuff in this movie I still like. But overall, it's just a fun ride that has some issues.
The way I fly.
In 5th place, we have the newest entry in the DCEU, Wonder Woman 1984. So this movie has been getting a lot of heat online recently, which I did not expect. I thought it would have been a well-received movie just like the original, but people have been dissing on this a lot. It went from an 89 on Rotten Tomatoes to, I believe, a 65 currently, dropping nearly 25%. It's probably even lower right now. That's crazy. And the user score, it has a 6 on IMDb. It's going to drop lower. It's going to end up on the 5s, which just blows my mind because Suicide Squad has a 6. What the fuck? The Metacritic user score is quite a bit lower than Suicide Squad. It's really shocking to me because I had fun with this movie. I'm not saying my opinion is the all right, the only correct one there is. I'm just surprised that this movie is getting the reception that it is because a lot of the issues people have with this movie are issues I think other films in the DCU have. People talk about a lack of action. I think Shazam definitely had a lack of action. People talk about, the third act being kind of a mess. Literally watch any of the other DCU films. People talk about the CGI. Watch any of the other DCEU films, right? Like, I think these are all issues that exist in the other films. Yes, this movie has pretty much all those issues, but I just didn't think those issues were as bad as they were in some of the other movies to the same extent. And especially when people are talking about the cheesiness of this movie as a big issue, all I can think of is Aquaman. And I'm not trying to, defend this movie too much. I'm just surprised by the amount of hate it's been getting, because I had a fun time with it. I don't think it's perfect. It definitely has issues, but I think it's a solid film overall. There's some moments in here that are some of my favorite in the DCEU, and there's other things in this movie that are very forgettable. As far as the positives go, Gal Gadot, excellent in this movie. She was very, very good here, a lot better than she was in the previous films. She really shined here, especially in the emotional moments. She really carried them. I don't think she was that great from an emotional standpoint in the first Wonder Woman, like when Robin, I don't know who it was, but one of the actresses, when that character died in the last film, her reaction to it didn't really work.
Please, no. 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 No, 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 no. No!
In this movie, I thought her acting was a lot better, especially, spoiler alert, but the scene where Steve passes, or not really passes away, but where she has to resent her wish and he disappears, I thought her acting there was really good. Like, she really sold the emotion.
I can't say goodbye. I can't say goodbye.
And I didn't, cry or anything like that, but it did get you in the feels. I thought it was very well handled. And it was a very powerful scene. She's running away, her wound's healing. She jumps into the air and she learns to fly finally. Yeah, the CGI is not the best there, but I think it's a really powerful moment. That's definitely my favorite scene in this movie, and I think it's up there, being one of my favorite moments in the DCEU. So very powerful stuff. I really like those kind of things in this movie, and overall, yeah, I really enjoyed my experience with Wonder Woman 84. Where my issues come in is with the story. I think all the character stuff in the first half is pretty good. The movie does take a while to get started. You don't really have a main threat until, what, an hour and 20 minutes in, which I can see that being a big complaint for a lot of people. I was fine with it because I did like the character stuff that was going on. They were bringing back Steve. I was surprised with Kristen Wiig. I actually liked her in this movie, and I liked what they did with her character. Her becoming Cheetah was a bit rushed, but I do like what they do with the characters in this movie. It's just that the final act in particular is very messy. When Pedro Pascal, you know, he's going around and he's getting everybody's wishes and stuff, I think the movie just becomes a bit too much of a clusterfuck. There's way too many things going on at once, and it's all over the place. So that aspect of the movie kind of failed for me with the final act. It wasn't like the first Wonder Woman where the final act is out of nowhere and doesn't fit with the tone of the movie or what it was setting up. I think it fit with this film. I just don't think it was a good final act, honestly. So that was my biggest issue. Another thing that was kind of a complaint of mine was Steve Trevor. I liked his character in this movie. He was a bit underused, but I did like him here. That being said, I don't love the way they brought him back. I'm fine with the whole idea of the magic stone that can make wishes come true. That's fine. I don't like that Steve takes over another guy's body because they sleep with each other, and this guy that was in that body had no control over that. So it's pretty much, rape, to be honest. And then I was thinking about it, when they go to Egypt and that kind of stuff, if he got shot, if Steve got killed by accident, would that kill the guy that his body is taken over? And, like, where's his family and all this? Are they worried about him? Like, I was just questioning things like that. Easily, they could have just... none of that would have been an issue if they just decided, yeah, Steve just appears out of nowhere. They did not have to do the whole thing where he's taking over another person's body. That was really unnecessary, in my opinion, and brings up a lot of rape vibes and questionable things in the film. So, if they just made him a random guy that appears, and he just appears out of nowhere, that would have been fine. And I also think when he disappears at the end, it would have made a bit more sense because you could have seen him maybe fading away or something as she resents her wish. But that was odd. From an action standpoint, I actually liked the movie. I think the action was better here than it was in the first movie. It was underused, but the first movie, for me personally, really overused slow motion. This movie didn't. I like how this movie, it felt more like classic Wonder Woman, right? Like I said, she's learning to fly and stuff. Her costume is more vibrant. She's using her lasso a bunch more. She's more defensive. She's not like the warrior version that we got in the previous movie, and I can see how some people might really love that version of her. I like both, but I just kind of liked that aspect of this movie. It was very Richard Donner-esque, which is something I've heard a lot of. I just love that aspect. I can see it's not going to be for everyone, but I enjoyed it personally. The movie also has an excellent score. Hans Zimmer does a great job with all the scores in this franchise. Batman vs. Superman has amazing themes. Man of Steel, Flight is so good, especially the scene where Superman takes off. That's excellent. But Wonder Woman 84, phenomenal score. I think he does such a great job here. And overall, the movie for me was a lot of fun. It definitely has issues. It's not perfect by any means, but I enjoyed it. So those are my thoughts on Wonder Woman 84.
But in time, they will join you in the sun. In time, you will help them accomplish wonders.
Fourth place, we have Man of Steel. So this is a film that, over the years, I've seen so much love for it from people. A lot of people think it's one of the best comic book movies of all time, and they think it's just an excellent Superman movie. I really like aspects of this movie. I think the first half is excellent. I love how this movie is basically a character study, I guess you could say, on Superman. It's a film about the humanity of the character. It explores those type of themes that the original versions and other adaptations of the character really haven't, because you look at 78, he's kind of already Superman in that movie. There's flashbacks and stuff, but this movie, he doesn't become Superman until like 45 minutes in. That's when he starts flying and stuff. And everything up until that point was a lot of great character moments with flashbacks of him as a child and that kind of stuff, and just hearing about his father, like Jonathan Kent, like giving him lessons and that kind of stuff. It was all stuff that I really, really liked. It was, very, very humanity-filled. People talk about how Superman's not very boyish or whatever, and this movie's not, Boy Scouty like he was in the Richard Donner versions. I agree, but I don't think he's like this dark, brooding character either, though. I don't agree with that statement. I still think he's a heroic character. The movie gives off just like a tone or a feeling of hope, and I've always liked that about it. So I still really like the way they did this movie personally from that aspect, and I think he is really good in the role, and I like him. So overall, yeah, I enjoy that stuff in the movie. Where my problems come in is with the second half. I think the second half, for me personally, just gets too messy. I understand that Superman is this character who has extreme power, so when he's fighting guys, it's going to get messy. There's going to be destruction, obviously. So that's not my issue. I think there's too much, right? Like, they fly through this little small town. A bunch of, restaurants and stuff get destroyed. He goes into a bank. He goes into a power plant, and it blows up. And then the final act is just constant destruction. It's just, like, huge, crazy stuff going on. And makes sense for the character. I just think it's a bit overdone. There's so many explosions. It looks like a Michael Bay film with worse visual effects. It's just kind of all over the place. I don't think it's messy from a story standpoint. I think it's actually, out of the DCU, one of the more well-developed stories. Like, it kind of has a consistent pattern throughout. It doesn't feel like it's jumping around a lot or anything. It's consistent. I just think that the final act is a bit too over the top for me personally. I can understand why people would still like it. It just doesn't work for me. I like Zod as a villain. I think he's really good. And yeah, I still enjoyed the movie, but it's got issues. I also don't like Jonathan Kent's death. It's so much better in 78 where he has a heart attack. First of all, it's more sad, and that's also something that Superman, no matter what, he couldn't fix that, right? It kind of teaches him that even despite his powers, he can't always save people, which is a good lesson. And in this one, it's like, nope, don't save me, there's a tornado. It's stupid. But yeah, whatever. Still a good movie. I still enjoyed it a lot. I just don't love the second half. I think the first half is great. The second half just doesn't work for me. But still, an enjoyable movie overall.
The turns, good man. Cruel.
Moving on to third place, we have Batman vs. Superman. This is the movie out of all the DCU that has grown on me by far the most since originally seeing it. Now, I have not watched the theatrical cut since seeing it in theaters. Ever since then, I've been watching the extended version, which in my opinion is far superior. Some people say it's a minor improvement. I think it's a big one, because the issue with the theatrical cut was that it was really messy. The story was not well developed. It spent too much time, with Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor and, Doomsday and stuff that really shouldn't have been in the movie, honestly, and then Justice League set up. And all the stuff like Superman on Trial, the real plot of the movie, that stuff is really cut down. It's missing things. And when you watch the extended cut, it's a half an hour longer, and those gaps are filled. You find out, he's on trial because that village at the beginning of the movie, the civilians and whatnot were killed by Lex Luthor's, gang, who, basically torched everyone with a flamethrower, making it look like Superman uses laser eyes and that kind of stuff. So there was, this build-up to, Superman is doing all this. And it kind of continues that whole aspect of Superman that I liked from Man of Steel, which was, the humanity of him and the questions about his character. Can he be accepted and that kind of stuff. I like that in this movie. I really like the tone of this film overall. I think Bruce Wayne / Batman's great in this film. There's issues with the character. I don't love how he kills without explanation. I especially hate how he uses guns. Even if they explain why he kills, guns should just not be a thing with the character. That being said, I love how they make him terrifying, not only to criminals but to civilians. I love the build-up between, about his hatred towards Superman. That's very well done. I actually think there's some good dialogue in this movie. The story, it's a bit jumbled sometimes, but I still think it's overall well written. And I just love that setup, right? Getting that continuation of the destruction from Man of Steel, it kind of has a purpose here, because that led to Rain Tower being destroyed and people that Bruce knew dying, so that's why he hates Superman. So I like that build-up. I don't like Lex Luthor as a character. I don't like the way that Jesse Eisenberg portrays him, but I like his scheme. I like how he kind of has been planting all these things all along. It's really good stuff, and I think it's well written. And I was thinking about Lex Luthor in this film. If he was played by somebody else, or if it just wasn't acted the way it was, the dialogue honestly works. I was thinking about Clancy Brown from the Justice League animated series, and I was looking at these lines, and I was like, yeah, if he honestly just had another actor, or it just was done, without the same type of goofiness, those lines could still work from a serious standpoint. But it's just the way they decided to do it. So yeah, I like the thematic stuff in this movie. Where it fails for me is the very final act. I don't think it's as bad as some of the other final acts in the DCU. I just don't think it's very good. I think it's too rushed. I don't like how, obviously the Martha scene's pretty dumb. I understand what they were going for, but they did not write it properly. The issue there as well is that this entire movie, Batman's had this fueled hatred towards Superman. He wants to kill this guy. And then all of a sudden, the next scene, once they decide that, we can't fight each other, all of a sudden Batman saves Martha, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm a friend of your son's. Like, you're a friend all of a sudden? I wouldn't even really say you guys are quite acquaintances. You just don't dislike each other anymore. Doesn't quite work for me. But, the final act with Doomsday, it's a bit rushed. I think it was ultimately unnecessary. I do like the death of Superman and how they handle it, and I think it ties into Justice League quite well as an idea, but there's just things about it that I think feel rushed. And the Justice League setup in this movie is pretty bad. The email attachments, all that stuff is really stupid. They could have kept that stuff to a minimum. I think it's overdone. And I'm also not a huge fan of Wonder Woman in this movie. She's kind of randomly thrown in. I don't think we needed her in combat. I think they could have removed her in the final fight. I think if she was just there as Diana Prince, that would have been fine, because they're kind of setting up her character then, and maybe she like steals the drive and that's it. I don't know. But overall, I really like the movie a lot more. I think the themes and that kind of stuff, and all of the stuff in the first half, Superman on trial, Clark Kent discovering Batman and going to Gotham to learn about him, all of that stuff, Lois Lane and her detective case, Batman's hatred towards Superman, that stuff is excellent. It's just the second half that for me, not only the second half, but the last act that kind of falters. Overall, still really enjoyed the movie. In second place, we have Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman, it's most people's favorite film in the DCU. It's either this or Man of Steel, I find. I really like this movie. I think it's a ton of fun. I think, it was the first great movie in the DCU. Obviously, I think that Batman vs. Superman is great now, but, at the time I didn't. But yeah, this movie is just so much fun. I mean, you have great chemistry between the male leads, between the two leads, between Gal Gadot and Chris Pine. I think they work so well together in this movie. The relationship was very believable, unlike, some of the other ones in the DCU, like Amber Heard and Jason Momoa. I do not buy that one, but this one really works in my opinion. It's well written. I like the smaller scale story and whatnot. It's just a very fun film. Where it fails is obviously the third act, which even Patty Jenkins, the director, has talked about, saying that was something that Warner Bros. Wanted to do. Originally, it was supposed to be smaller scale. And the problem with the third act isn't that it's just, a random boss fight that's thrown in there so that they can have a big conclusion. It's that it goes against the first two acts, because the whole movie was about how, her view on mankind was so narrow-minded, right? She was thinking, because it's a fish out of water story, and it works well for humor, but it also works well for developing her character, because she thinks everybody is good at heart, and it's just that Ares has corrupted all of them. And so when, there's the final act where it's like, yeah, some people are actually bad, that's just, people are good, people are bad, that's just how it is. It teaches her character a lesson. And the problem is that by bringing in Ares, all of a sudden, it's like what she said is true. And yeah, Ares is behind all of it. And it just kind of goes against what was set up in the first two acts, and it kind of destroys the message of the movie, in my opinion. And yeah, that's the big problem with the film. I still think the final act, besides the fact that it changes the story, is not that good. It's just another messy CGI fight with Ares. Ares is a villain that is so cool in the comics and in the Justice League TV show. They should have just saved him for a third movie. I do not mind having Ares in the DCU. He's a badass villain. Just save him. Don't throw him into Wonder Woman, because he's in the movie for like 10 minutes and he gets killed. And he gets killed in a really, in my opinion, rushed way. So that was lame. Even besides him, I think the other villains, Dr. Poison and Ludendorff, I don't like them either. The movie spends a decent amount of time trying to make you believe that Ludendorff is Ares. So when you rewatch the movie and he's not Ares, those moments just feel like wasted screen time. And also, it's a minor issue, it's not a huge one. I don't like in movies when it's set in Germany and stuff and we're following German characters and they're speaking English. I understand it's a Hollywood action film, comic book movie, it's not a big deal. It just annoys me. Even Suicide Squad has the villain speaking a different language with subtitles, for God's sake. Suicide Squad does that. This movie can at least do it. It doesn't affect my overall thoughts, it's just a minor thing that kind of annoys me. But still, fun movie, great characters, pretty good action sequences. It does overuse slow-mo, in my opinion. I've talked about that. I think Patty Jenkins did that too much, so I'm glad she cut back on that in '84. But yeah, some really good moments, some very good character building and stuff, and it has just a very fun, enjoyable tone. Some messy CGI, but the visuals, the colors and stuff are very nice, and overall, I like the movie quite a bit. Alright, and finally, on to number one, if you guys haven't guessed already, my favorite film in the DCU is Shazam. This is a movie that, since initially seeing it in theaters, I have loved this entire time. It's just such a fun movie. It feels like a classic comic book film. It's a ton of, fun. It's very enjoyable, and I also think it has the best arc out of any of the DCU heroes. I'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, I mean, it's just a fun movie. First of all, character-wise, I love it. I think Billy Batson, at least when he's an adult. I don't really think when he's a kid he's that great, but I think when he's Shazam, he's in the suit, he's just so fun and energetic. The relationship between him and Freddy is so fun and unique. It's just a great aspect of the movie. The humor is excellent. It doesn't always work, but it lands most of the time. And I love how the movie is basically, it doesn't have the most memorable action in the DCU. It doesn't have that much in general, and that's why it didn't annoy me that much that Wonder Woman didn't. But I just love how, you know, the movie, it's what a teenager would do if they had superpowers and if they could make themselves an adult. They would go to strip clubs. They would go get alcohol. So I like that they did that and that he uses his powers irresponsibly at first. It's just funny and it's accurate. The weak points of the movie, I think the villain's kind of weak. I don't really enjoy that storyline that much. And I also think the subplot with the mom, I don't think they really needed to dive into it, honestly. I think if he just got lost or something, you know, whatever, you could explain something with his mom, but I just think kind of the way they resolve that, where they find her magically, it's just a little bit dumb. But yeah, I mean, going on to the characters for a second, I love the message of this movie. It's a film about family, and as far as Billy's character goes, I mean, he's treating his powers very irresponsibly throughout the entire movie, and at the end of it, he realizes, you know, he's been avoiding families and all that stuff for this entire time, and he realizes that this one means a lot to him. And so when they're in danger, he finally realizes he needs to overcome his fear of the bad guy, stop being cowardly, and finally face the villain and save his family, and he becomes a true hero. And that's just such a great arc, because a lot of the other DCU characters, I mean, some of them have good arcs, but they're kind of rushed sometimes. This one was very well paced, in my opinion, very well handled. And I think it's great. And then you have the, you know, at the core of the movie, there's the family, and all that stuff I just think is great and really, really nice. So those are the aspects of Shazam I love. Overall, movie is just a ton of fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. There's also, like, some terrifying moments. I think the demons, or whatever they're called, like the 7 deadly sins, they're terrifying. The scene where they are in the office building and they kill the villain, Dr. Sivana's parent, or his dad and his brother, that scene was terrifying. That was really creepy. So I like how they blended those tones together and it all fits. Humor works well. Just a fun movie. The action's not the best. Some of the CGI is wonky and the score is a bit forgettable, but it's still so well told and just a fun, exciting film overall that I really can't complain that much, guys. So those are my thoughts on Shazam, and that is my ranking of the DCU overall. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your ranking down below. I'll look forward to seeing what you guys have to say, and please don't argue. Anyways, thank you all for watching this, and see you guys next time.